people who have very little, I've found myself talking about God more than I'm used to. After I graduated from college, I volunteered as a teacher in San Quentin State Prison in Marin. One conversation in particular stands out. An older man told me about his belief in the spirits of his family members and how they watch over him. He had this profound connection to his ancestors in the U.S. and Africa that seemed to provide him with so much strength. When I lived in Haiti, I noticed that people who had almost nothing would often invoke God in everyday conversation. When you ask someone how they're doing, they often say, "Moi bien, grâce à Dieu." I'm good, thanks to God. When talking about pretty much anything in the future, folks end with, "Si bon Dieu veut," if God wills it to be so. I used to walk around the Tenderloin late at night as part of the San Francisco night ministry. The people in our city with the least talk the most about God. When I would say God bless you to people on the street, they wouldn't hesitate to say, God bless you too. When I got into long conversations with folks, they often would talk about their spiritual strength. I remember one woman in particular telling me about the many difficulties she's faced in her life, from addiction to violence to homelessness, but she ended her story with something incredible. She said, "You know, God never gives me something I can't handle." And yet many of us who have more comfortable lives, more materially secure lives, feel less connected to God. There are many, many reasons we can find it hard or undesirable to be in relationship with God, whatever God means to you. I want to focus on three that I think are more prevalent in this community. The first reason I think people are reluctant to be in relationship with God or don't believe in God is that I think it's hard to overstate the amount of damage that fundamentalist religion has done to belief. So often when we think of religion in this country, we think of the hatred and closed-mindedness that comes with certain types of conservative religion. We think of churches and synagogues that mistreat LGBTQ people. We think of religious spaces that ask us to check science at the door. This type of religion has been so dominant in our country that many of us think that believing in God or the God of organized religion means surrendering our ability to think for ourselves. A second reason it can be difficult to talk about God is that God is incredibly hard to make sense of, especially for us who are well-educated and perhaps even overly educated. We are used to thinking in terms of what makes sense rationally. Whether we went to medical school or law school or some other form of secular education, many of us feel that truth is about things we can demonstrate or prove. The problem I've found with God is that whenever you try to put God in a box, something slips out. Is God the God of our prayer book, a God who sets the world into being, splits the sea of reeds, and continuously renews creation? Our knowledge of physics would seem to suggest otherwise. Is the universe only composed of the atoms and energy that can be observed scientifically? The incredible personal strength we've all either surprised ourselves with or been surprised to see in others would tell us there's more to life than that. Is God the inner sense of strength that helps us to overcome difficulty? The awe we feel at a beautiful sunset would tell us that the God of resilience doesn't capture the whole picture. But is God the force behind that beautiful sunset? The connection we feel when we look into the eyes of another person would tell us God is more than that. I could go on, but try as we might, God always seems to defy what we can express in words, to go beyond what we can wrap our minds around. This can make it very hard to be in relationship with God. I want to focus especially on a last reason folks who tend to be better off and more comfortable materially are reluctant to bring God into their lives. When we are materially comfortable, it's more likely that we trick ourselves into thinking we have full control over things. I'll speak from personal experience. I grew up with the implicit knowledge that if I did okay in school, if I made an effort to make friends and meet people, if I played by the rules, I would most likely end up with a good life. I would likely get married, I would likely find work, and I would likely be okay. Now, this is a tricky problem to talk about because those things have, by and large, worked out for me, but I don't want to confuse good fortune with guarantees. The truth, which many of us realize when we experience death, illness, or other setbacks, the truth is that life is incredibly precarious. Think about how many things had to happen in the world to make us as we are now, sitting in this room together. Beginning with the molecules that came together to form our planet with water at just the right distance from the sun and with the right circumstances for evolution to happen, the way our lives are now is an incredible occurrence of chance. I wonder if so much of the way our lives are structured in San Francisco in 2025 leads us to take things for granted, to not question the way things are. There's the advances in medicine that have gotten us to the point that we have more control over our health. I wonder about the super clean linoleum floors of the stores that we shop in. Does this disconnect from the messiness that comes from being in connection with nature, what does that do to us? And there's also how infrequently we, or most of us, encounter death. We again and again receive the message that we have control, that we live separate from the whims of nature, that we are removed from the chaos of the universe. Alas, the truth that we must all confront for ourselves and our loved ones is that we have little say over how we enter and exit the world. Even beyond that, we have little say over what will happen next in history, the direction in which the wind will blow, or our reaction when we walk down the street and the sunlight hits our face and in the most amazing way. A few years ago, I encountered a fancy term for this. In one of Rabbi Shai Held's books, Held writes about an awareness of the contingency of being. The world doesn't have to be the way it is. Much of the time, we're incredibly lucky things have worked out the way they have. It's easy to forget that, to become complacent, to take things for granted. Awe is the experience we get when we become amazed at the contingency of being. It is that moment of looking out at the sun setting over the yellow grass of the Northern California bluffs and being overcome by how amazing it is that you're just seeing what you're seeing. This experience of awe lies at the heart of Judaism. It's in the prayers we are asked to say every day. It was in tonight's service when we sang the Micha Mocha, and it's a cornerstone of Jewish thought. Beyond the synagogue, there are many ways to bring awe into our lives. In our Torah portion, Tazria Metzora, we read about the rules of purity and isolation that come after the birth of a child. Although it can be hard to relate these rules to our current reality, the Women's Torah Commentary offers a connected teaching from the Talmud that speaks to awe at the miracle of life. According to this teaching, there are three partners in the creation of a child. A father offers a child its bones and nails and the whites of its eyes. A mother gives the kid its flesh, its skin, its blood, and the pupil of the eyes. And finally, God gives the child its eyesight, the ability to think, and the ability to breathe. Our sages remind us of the wonder of human existence. Yes, some of this could be explained in terms of biology, which they describe as what comes from the parents. But much of our human existence comes from somewhere else. We all come from somewhere mysterious, somewhere beyond comprehension. We can experience awe by spending time in nature. One of the best purchases I've made recently is the Muir Woods Park Pass. It's actually a really great deal, and I'm not paid to say that. You pay a modest fee, and then you can go to Muir Woods whenever you want. All you have to do is pay for parking. Kate, Sella, and I go to Muir Woods at least once a month. It's incredible to stand underneath these 1,000-year-old trees and think about all they've lived through. When we went to Muir Woods last week, Sella, in her typical 2-year-old fashion, insisted on walking up a new side path. Kate and I followed our toddler, and we found ourselves somewhere we'd never been before. The trees, moss, and wood sorrel were beautiful, but the best part of it was that we heard a woodpecker in the distance. We stood and waited to hear, standing in rapt silence beneath the trees, waiting for the woodpecker to peck again. It was easy to marvel. Finally, we often experience awe during the times in our lives when things become unstable, when we are taken off balance, when we lose a job and have to dig deep, when we face our own deaths, or the death of a loved one. By living in a way in which nature seems tamed, by living largely insulated from having to worry about where we'll find the next meal or whether war will uproot our lives, by living in such sterility and stability, our lives are quite different from those of most people over the span of human history. There's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot these days that I think is actually quite meaningful. Every so often you hear people talk about us as stardust. It's a cliche, but it's true. Over billions and billions of years, we have emerged out of the dust of stars. Living in this city, we rarely see the night sky, and not only because of the fog. Our indoor lives and the city lights block out the stars. Judaism offers us words to sing written by people who were intimately familiar with the night sky. The truth is that we exist because of the stars, and we exist as specks of dust at the whim of the stars. This is one of the essential insights of our tradition and our prayer book, and it's worth putting it at the center of our lives. Shabbat Shalom.